Ladies and gentlemen,
We're about to get started. Hello? Okay, George will be out in a moment, but before we get started, we want to get an idea of some of the questions you will be asking.
Yo, can you go over the noise?
Okay, everybody, please, not all at once. This is nuts. This is not working.
you're right. Please, people. Let's just bring out George.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, George Whittam.
Hey everybody, Happy New Year, and welcome to another edition of Whittam's World. Well, we've got a question this week to start off the year about audio processing and how to use audio processing properly. And in this case, specifically, we're working in a software environment. So I'll be using Twisted Wave as usual as my example and showing you how I use Twisted Wave. This question came in from Scott McDonald, and he says, I know that many places do not want the VO talent to send auditions or completed work with any processing whatsoever. However, there are times when some post-production is worth the time and effort for a client who does not know about doing it themselves. In what order do you use the various processing in post-processing? Is it best to EQ first, then compress, or limit if needed? Who's on first? All the best, Scott McDonald. So great question. I thought this would be really something that would apply to just about anybody. So I like these kinds of questions. They will help many of you in determining if you're going to use processing and how to use it. So let me start off with just recording a little bit of something in Twisted Wave here for you, so we have some audio to work with. We got some clean audio to work with. My parents didn't trust my Uncle Bobby. All right. So let's see, what would I do for processing? Well, let's start with showing you a typical effects stack that I would use. So I'll go to effects stacks. So let's do this one. I have one called male moderate. Always start by normalizing your audio before processing to a set limit that you always use. Everybody probably thinks I'm crazy. I'm the only one that does this, but I'll tell you, it makes people's lives a lot easier. Always start by normalizing to -3. That's the way I calibrate my audio. That's the way I recommend that you do it as well, and you normalize using peak value. Once you've done that, then your processing settings will work more consistently. Your compression thresholds and your gate thresholds, all that stuff will work beautifully and consistently this way. All right, this is a pretty straightforward one that I would use quite often, or at least start out as a starting base. I like using templates to start my processing stacks so that I have the basic elements already preloaded and ready to go. So in this effects stack, and this would apply to any kind of a processing you'd use, whether it's Pro Tools and effects channels, inserts, or in Adobe Audition using the effects rack tool. Or if you have to do it manually in some other software, this is the order in which I would do it. So I'd start with a high-pass filter. So what I'm using the high-pass filter for is for filtering out low-frequency noise or rumble. I'm living in a house that has basically almost no rumble at all, so it's not a big deal here, but many of you probably will have some low-frequency noise. So setting the high-pass filter first will handle that pretty nicely for you and filter out everything below that frequency. Then I usually go to compression and or noise gating at this point. And I use the dynamics processor that comes with Twisted Wave audio units. And the settings I usually use a takt time under 1/100th of a millisecond, usually 5 thousandths of a second. Very, very fast attack. And a release about 0.8 or so. And gain, right now it's at 159, but normally I would just have that zeroed out. And I'll have a threshold, depending on where I want my compression to start, -25 to -20. And my gate or downward expander threshold somewhere around, -52 or something like that. But that depends on the noise in your room. Ratio 2 to 2.5 to 1. So I'm not going to train you on how to use every effect in this video. That's not the point. I'm just trying to show you what I use and in what order I use them. So I'll do the high pass, then I'll do compression and noise gating. Then I'll do my EQ sculpting. So my EQ comes next, and I use a graphic equalizer, but you can use a parametric equalizer, whatever type of equalizer you like to use. But I find a 31-band graphic EQ works great for tone shaping and making little corrections and just smoothing out the response and getting a pleasing sound if necessary. Not everybody needs EQ. Just because you have the tools doesn't mean you need to use them. So keep that in mind too. I do find often that people need to reduce some frequencies in the upper 6 to 10K range because that's where things get really sibilant, especially after compression. So I do find doing a dip down on that range makes sense. And then I'm doing further high-pass filtering as well, just as a matter of course. There's nothing ever that should be in the voice range or captured in the recording below 60 hertz. So that goes away. Then finally, I'll do my limiting. And again, I'm just using peak limiter. Comes with the Apple computer in audio units. Attack time, 2 milliseconds. Release time, about 7 milliseconds. And then the pre-gain. What I'm using pre-gain for is kind of a makeup gain. So after the levels are reduced through the use of compression, I'll show you how the volume changes so dramatically. So I'll play this back. In 1954, Desi Arnaz made my Uncle Bobby a TV star by casting him as Bobby the Bellboy in I Love Lucy. So that being said, if I play back without using my peak limiter, let's see where the levels end up. But Desilu's lawyers did an end run around Screen Actors Guild residual contracts. So it's only peaking under -6, okay? But for a final product that I want to, or a final product and or an audition where I want it to be real present and really come out, I want to make up the gain. I want to get more levels before clipping and make it sound louder without sounding over the top. So I'll use the limiter carefully for that. I have I have it set to pre-gain setting of about 7 dB right now. When I enable that, let's see what that sounds like. So Bobby's stardom brought him fame, but not fortune. Many years after I Love Lucy went off the air, I tracked down my uncle in Hollywood and met him for the first time. Bobby Jellison was a storyteller, and in me he found an enthusiastic audience. And now let's bypass the whole chain and hear what it sounds like with nothing. Many years after I Love Lucy went off the air, I tracked down my uncle in Hollywood and met him for the first time. And now with. Years after I Love Lucy went off the air, I tracked down my uncle in Hollywood and met him for the first time. Bobby Jellison was a storyteller, and in me he found an enthusiastic audience, although I often wondered how much of what he told me was true. So you can hear the background noise that normally would be in my office from my computer and stuff is reduced dramatically because of the noise gate. It works pretty nicely. But you're going to have to make sure the client likes that process, and you won't know until you try or if you ask them. And if they don't know what they're doing, you're going to have to trust your own instincts, your own judgment, or ask someone like me for my opinion on what you should be sending out. So after I've processed, let me apply. Now look at the waveform. It's definitely a lot hotter, more uniform. And as you'll see, the peaks are now hitting right at 0 dB. So sometimes that's not an issue. For auditions, not a problem. But for jobs, some engineers may balk at that. They may think you might be clipping. They don't like the levels that hot. So then jump to normalize again and just bump it back down to -3. That's the way I do it. So your results will be very consistent this way if you use normalizing first, then apply your effects in the order of high pass filtering, compression dynamics or noise gating, EQing, and limiting. That order seems to work very, very well for me. Sometimes I add another processor in there. Sometimes I vary things. Sometimes I don't use EQ, depending on what the needs are for the particular project. But that's a long answer to a simple question, but I wanted to show you more detail, give you a little bit more of a head start for those that want to experiment. So if you've got a question you'd like to have answered on the show, As always, send it into whittamsworld@edgestudio.com, and I'll look forward to answering it on a future show. And if you'd like to get more information about how I do what I just did, or have me create an effects stack like this for you, or an effects preset in any one of the softwares that you use, I'm available to do that for you. You can go over to vostudiotech.com and check out the services menu and see what I have to offer in there for you. I'll be happy to set one up custom for you and use my ears to help you, and I can be your virtual engineer. So thanks for watching. This has been another episode of Whittam's World, and I'll see you guys all next week. Happy New Year.